congressional district, but I have served for 26 years on the House Judiciary Committee. In that responsibility, I have been at the forefront of reauthorizing the Voting Rights Act over several occasions. Each of those previous occasions have been in a bipartisan manner. We have reauthorized the Voting Rights Act under Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, George H.W. Bush, George W. Bush, and of course, we have since been fighting to reauthorize it since the Shelby case and the administration of President Obama. Voting is about democracy. Voting has no partisan tinge. Voting is not red or blue. Voting is the basic infrastructure of how our democracy survives. Just as an aside, it is not the filibuster. That is a rule. And both Madison and Jefferson argued against the tyranny of the minority. So we are here today as advocates of voting. We're here today as advocates of democracy. We could be in any neighborhood that voted for or against any of our positions. Our election officer has no position. Her responsibility is to ensure that every single voter, whatever their affiliation, gets to vote. Today, as a member of the House Judiciary Committee, which has authority over voting laws across America, that committee is a committee who upholds and passes laws that does not impact one party versus another. It impacts the laws of America. So today we are here calling for the notification of a crisis, a near constitutional crisis, a near crisis in democracy, a crisis that the state of Texas is entering into on a deep fall where we cannot stop it. We will be seeing in the next couple of weeks the massive rejecting and throwing out of mail applications to receive the mail ballot. Now, these are coming from registered voters. These voters believe that they are registered. They are registered, and they are coming to exercise their voting right, which has a constitutional premise. Now, first of all, because of the new oppressive law that was passed in SB 1, and I want to be very clear, this is hurting everyone. This is not singular to neighborhoods, but it is having a major impact on vulnerable communities and certainly communities of color. Today we are standing here to notify the community to be attentive, because your election officers want nothing more than for you to be able to vote. This is a sample ballot. The sample ballot has the very small area where a senior citizen could rightly miss it. A person who is disabled could rightly miss it. You have to put a number there. They could rightly miss it right here. They then have to mail it to an envelope. Our officials are trying to make this as easy as possible, but they have to put their number back here. Remember, these seniors and others have been voting for decades legally, and they had not the responsibility of putting the number. But as of December 2021, they're getting information, or not getting any information, to be honest with you. It did not come from the state, that they now have to put their number. These are people who have worked, who pay taxes, and who are concerned about their civic responsibility. These are the two ballots. Republican and Democrat. These are very busy ballots. Many people are running and they are looking for the voting public to have the ability to pick a person they choose. What does that mean? It means factually that if you do not have a social security number, a partial number, or a driver's license number to put on your mail ballot application to match the identification on your voter registration, that already sounds complicated. If I can make it very clear, you can send a number in, but if our election officials, who we are very proud of their work, if it doesn't match your voter registration card that you may have registered years ago, you are rejected. They will make an effort, and you will hear from our elections officer to call you, but you may not have a number. If you don't have a number, they've made an effort. There is a point in time, if you have not fixed that number, your ballot is rejected. Let me share with you some of the reality of what is going on. Already in Austin, 300 applications have failed to meet the law's strict requirements. Texas rejects hundreds of mail ballot applications under new law. Now that is as of a few days ago. Unfortunately, more here is in Dallas County. Hundreds have been rejected in North Texas. Hundreds. Vote by mail rejections are testing the integrity of Texas Republican voting law. I didn't write these articles, but I'm going to be very honest with everyone here. I'm a lawyer and I believe in getting the facts and arguing the law. But right now I'm in a panic. And I'm not ashamed to say it. It is a panic. Because I know that there are millions of voters with expectancy to be able to vote, millions of voters that will be sending in their mail ballot. And our election officials will be subjected to the non-waivable law, non-compromise law, non-option law, meaning they have no way out than to reject these ballots of the faithful citizens who've helped build this state and build this nation. And for that reason, I've joined with my colleague who knows his way around the issues of civil rights, who's been a past chair of the Hispanic Caucus, who has been a fighter for human rights, the subcommittee chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee. We have joined together to write the Department of Justice, and we ask for immediate assistance to ensure that all Texas election officials, including the Secretary of State, make available, first of all, for distribution on an equal and non-discriminatory basis, voter registration cards for all eligible non-registered persons, and to NGO and nonpartisan groups dedicated to increasing voter participation. Number one, the reason is because our Secretary of State has said they have few ballots, few applications, and the deadline for applications is January 31st, must be postmarked. The second thing, the most grave, is that we also wrote to request, this is the language of the letter sent to the Department of Justice by Congressman Castro and myself. We also write to request that the Department of Justice take appropriate action to enjoin Texas Elections Administration officials from rejecting a mail ballot application in the event of a mismatch between the voter ID number provided by the registered voter on mail ballot applications and his or her voter registration application. Let me be very clear. We know that our election officers have no option but to do their job. We need federal intervention. We're calling on federal help which in most instances, if they intervene, most instances, voter registration was submitted several years ago previously, and often by persons of advanced age or suffering from physical infirmities, or maybe our veterans. And so we are asking, as they have gone into Georgia, we're asking for that assistance now so that Texas voters who cherish the right to vote justifiably are skeptical of voter ID laws, because we understand how these laws, like poll taxes and literary tests, can be used to impede or negate the ability of seniors, racial and language minorities, and young people who cast their ballots. And let me be clear, young people use their ballots who are away at school. And how would they remember possibly to have the number that they had before? And so in light of the fact that we did not pass the federal voting rights laws, we're going to our only option, and that is to seek the help of the United States Department of Justice. Let me announce today gotten their attention. They are now studying the letter that we have sent, and what was said is that the Department of Justice will be in touch with us and the state of Texas. We must, if they can't speak for themselves, we must speak for them. I'm delighted now to ask Congressman Castro to make your remarks now. Congressman, thank you again for the fight, and thank you for joining me in the fight. I am in a panic, but most of all, we cannot lose this one, because democracy determines and demands our fight for people's right to vote. Congressman Joaquin Castro, thank you, of San Antonio.
Thank you, Congresswoman Jackson Lee, and it's great to be with you, and also the people standing with you there in Houston, Harris County. I join you all from my hometown of San Antonio and Bexar County. Thank you, Sheila, for always standing up for what's right, for justice, and most of all, particularly today, for people's right to vote in Texas and throughout the country. The new voter suppression laws passed by the Republican legislature have created chaos in county election administration's offices across the state. By now, I estimate thousands of mail ballot applications have been rejected across the state, including hundreds in my hometown of San Antonio, Bexar County. And even the governor in his office has tried to blame it on county elections administrators because they know that they have created a man-made political disaster that is depriving Texans of their right to vote. And this was very intentional. They've been trying to put up every obstacle in the way of allowing Texans to vote for years now, for well over a decade, in an attempt to hold on to state political power. And so I join Congresswoman Jackson Lee in asking the Department of Justice to intervene and to enjoin the state from rejecting these mail ballot applications. And to give you, and the Congresswoman alluded to it, but to give you just a concrete example of how pernicious this law is, we have heard stories now of people's ballot applications being rejected because they didn't put the proper number, either their social security number or their driver's license number, that they used originally when they registered to vote. Now, how is somebody supposed to remember what number they used years and years ago for some of them when they originally registered to vote? So this is an example of what seems like a small thing, but has a very concrete, pernicious effect on what I believe will be thousands and thousands of Texans' ability to get a mail ballot and actually be able to turn it in to vote. And we know that Greg Abbott in the Republican legislature, although Sheila's right, this is affecting people of different political stripes across the state, let's be clear about something. Greg Abbott in the Republican legislature did this because in the November 2020 election, they saw that they were losing in mail ballots. They saw that throughout the state, in many parts of the state, they were losing when it came to mail ballot votes. Even though the Texas Secretary of State at the time and others conceded that the election in 2020 was safe and secure. In other words, there wasn't widespread voter fraud There was no reason to create this kind of chaos in our election system, in our mail ballot application system, and yet, as an instrument to hold on to power, they passed this legislation. And so we need the federal government to step in now and enjoin to stop this injustice and make sure that people, many of whom have been voting for years and years this way, it's elderly folks, it's disabled folks, that they're able to vote in the upcoming primary and also in the general election of 2022. With that, I'll turn it back over to you, Congresswoman.
Congressman Castro, thank you. If you would remain for questions, we are gratified for your presence here today. It shows that this is statewide. That's why I'm so glad that we've joined together. I believe that we're going to have a succession of press conferences, outcry, and protests, frankly, when families understand that their loved ones are not able to vote or there are persons in hospitals. I just want to make the point, there are people with COVID that cannot come out, and they cannot come out during the primary. And as was so ably done by our election officers, Mr. Holland's last session, the last election, he provided for those kind of people, or those people, if you will. But there are people who are in hospitals who are able physically to make a decision about their vote. They may not be able to have the right number, but they are registered voters. So let me now ask and express my appreciation for the Harris County Attorney, Mr. Christian Menifee, who has been consistent in working for all of those in Harris County, but been consistent on empowering the county to work on behalf of the people. And particularly, he has been an advocate for vulnerable people who have not had legal representation as it relates to issues, making sure the county is promoting democracy. County Attorney Menifee.
Thank you very much, Congresswoman, for your leadership in getting us all here today, and I join in your calls as well as the calls and leadership of Congressman Castro in calling for federal government intervention. Let's be clear, this pernicious attempt to stop folks from having fair access to the ballot box didn't start today. It started in 2013 when the United States Supreme Court in the Shelby County case gutted the pre-clearance condition for the Voting Rights Act. Now, this was a rule that required certain states that had historically discriminated against certain groups of people to get pre-clearance from the United States Attorney General before they could pass laws that impacted voting. Now, when that part of the Voting Rights Act was gutted, you saw these states take on a foot race to pass laws that are designed to stop certain communities of color from voting. And in this law and its predecessors, it was very clear. We saw Representative Briscoe Cain on the floor of the Texas House say that a previous version of this law was intended to ensure purity at the ballot box. We saw previous versions of this bill attempt to prohibit folks from voting on Sundays before 1 p.m., knowing very well that it is a time-old tradition for African American churches to participate in Souls to the Polls event to get people to participate in the democratic process. It didn't start today. It's part of a pattern, and Texas is engaging in that pattern. Just 3 years ago, we saw a United States Circuit Court say about laws in another state, and these laws included voter ID laws, increased voter ID laws. They specifically said that these laws were designed to go after African Americans. The court said specifically that they targeted African Americans with almost surgical precision. SB 1, what we're seeing here, is just the latest attempt from certain government officials to try to undermine the right to vote for communities of color and specifically black people. This law is about stopping your grandmother from voting. It's about stopping your disabled neighbor from voting. And that's why we're here today calling on the federal government for intervention. Now, there's a few different pieces here. I join in on Congresswoman Jackson Lee's call and Congressman Castro's call for federal government intervention. We also have our elections administrator who you're going to hear from, Isabel Longoria, who is fighting the fight on the front end to ensure that when people's ballot applications are rejected, that they're getting an opportunity to find out that it was rejected and to submit another application. But the third prong of that attack is my office has been fully engaged in litigation that involves the Department of Justice, many advocacy groups across this country against the state to fight back against SB 1, to fight back against its onerous prohibitions, to fight back against the rules that it puts in place that are designed to be barriers from your family members, from your friends, from members of our community to participate in the process. And as the county attorney, I'll continue to stand up for voters in the courts, but it's going to take more than that. It's going to take a team effort, and we're going to have to continually sound the alarm about what's going on today. So again, Congresswoman Jackson Lee, thank you for your leadership and sounding the alarm, because this is not a political issue. This is not an issue that's only important to the Congresswoman, only important to me. This is an issue that is important to our parents, to our grandparents, to folks who participate in the political process but may not be able to make it to the polls on a day to vote and instead have to vote by mail. So this is about protecting our democracy, and you have my commitment, Congresswoman, that I will continue to fight alongside you.
Thank you so very much. As is indicated, the good news regarding Harris County is that our appointed election officer has been working on this matter and studying this really bill that cuts democracy, but she has been studying it, attempting to ensure that she could try to be of help to all voters. Remember what I said, all voters. Trying to find a way to ensure that there would be at least some opportunity for a remedial approach. But in so doing, I don't want to speak for her. I think she has acknowledged that this is going to be an avalanche of a crisis. We thank her for the work that she's been doing and her desires to ensure that all of us can vote. And it is our commitment to bring you as much help as we possibly can. But I thought it was important for our Harris County Elections Administrator simply to bring us the facts of the difficulty and the challenges of what is being seen and what may be seen. And so I thank you, Isabel Longoria.
Good afternoon. Isabel Longoria, the Harris County Elections Administrator. I just want to start, as what was reiterated with the numbers. So far, as of yesterday evening, in Harris County, we have had to reject 767 mail ballot applications. 767 mail ballot applications. That's 8% alone from these ID issues. That doesn't encompass the other reasons we might reject a mail ballot application. That is more. For just these ID reasons, that is more than we saw in 2018, the last comparable election. These are mail ballot applications that, as was stated, people who do not put an ID number because they've been taught for so long, don't put sensitive information on anything that is going in the mail. Be wary of your Social Security number and your Texas driver's license number, of keeping that safe so that no one can steal your identity. So we have people who are fearful of putting that information down. If they do put down one of those numbers, say you put down your Texas driver's license number, a valid and legal number, but in our voter registration records, all we have are your Social Security number, even though both of those are valid and true, I am not allowed to use that to compare them together and actually register a voter for a mail ballot application. These are things that we are seeing for the first time ever. Senate Bill 1, the Texas election law that passed last fall, is in effect for the first time ever for the primaries, a large election where we see a significant amount of turnout in Harris County. That is why I'm worried. These rejections are just the tip of the iceberg. We are sending out mail ballot applications starting this week. We know that those onerous ID requirements now on the mail ballots themselves will have to match the application and the voter registration record. And again, this isn't a question of should someone be able to prove through their signature and otherwise that they are able to vote. It's a question of getting caught up in the administrative details, the red tape. That's what I'm most concerned about. Harris County, we are the only major county that I know of so far who has been able to dedicate our call center resources to calling voters, to emailing you, but only if you put down your phone number or email so that we can contact you. Only about 30% of our voter registration records have contact information for voters. So we are even handcuffed from that capacity to reach out, even if we are one of the few who can reach out. And every resource we dedicate to reaching out to voters, which is my prime directive, is another resource that we can't put to researching those mail ballot applications or those mail ballot issues or setting up voting locations or otherwise impairing the upcoming elections. And this is just the first election. In Harris County this year, we have a historic 8 elections that we are hosting in 1 year, more than has ever been hosted in Harris County in the last 30 years. And so for every election, the primary runoff, the local elections, the gubernatorial coming up, we will see these same issues, the same rejection rate, and that's just for the mail ballots alone. So my concern is even in a county as big as Harris County where we can dedicate resources to voters, we are still seeing these troublesome and incredibly high rejection rates. That being said, call us. When in doubt, fill it out. Let us have every opportunity by including both your driver's license and social security number if you have both of those, so that we can use every resource at our disposal to research a voter, to go through every disposal, every database we have, every last form, going back to the archives to make sure that we can help you as a voter, and include a phone number or an email so that we can reach out to you. And I will remind voters that once we get to the mail ballot portion, you might have to come in person if we have to reject your mail ballot, the actual vote, per the Senate Bill 1 law, which we know is not always feasible for folks who live abroad, those voters in the military or overseas, students, or even our students, exactly, or anyone with a physical disability who, for the very reason they requested a mail ballot, is the very reason they will not be able to come to our office and cure their mail ballot. So I'm beseeching anyone who can help, everyone up here this afternoon, the federal government, that the time for intervention is now, because us local elected officials are pulling out all the stops, but these laws were designed to prevent us from helping voters.
Hundreds in North Texas, hundreds in San Antonio, Bexar County, hundreds in Harris County, 702.
767.
67 already. This is January the 25th. The fear that has been given to seniors by law enforcement and family members: don't give out your private information, don't give out your Social Security, smacks up into a law that clearly is meant to suppress. Quite contrary to what we've been telling seniors. Don't answer the phone and give anything over the phone. Don't share your information. Identity theft is rampant, absolutely rampant. And seniors have been one of our major targets, the major targets, not our, of identity theft. Looting their accounts, taking their pensions. And yet now we have a voting law that wants them to feel comfortable or to find a number to put on the ballot. In the summer and fall of 2021, we were trying to save America. And as the Justice Department indicated to me, their eyes are on Texas now. Brave men and women, state legislators, had to make a very difficult decision for justice and for democracy. And they left the state, still to be acknowledged and applauded, not a good term, to be recognized for the difficult decision they had to take. But isn't it interesting that they couldn't have been more right? The desperation that we see now and the desperate circumstances of, in 2022 in America, the seat of democracy, the beacon of light around the world now hears us say that we are throwing out or being made to throw out ballots. How right they were. I'm glad that they're standing here with me to fight this fight, to join me in Congressman Castro in the fight against this effort and call for the Department of Justice help, let me acknowledge Representative Ron Reynolds, a more senior member and soon-to-be chairman, president of the Texas Black State Legislators. Mr. Reynolds.
Thank you, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. And let me say at the outset, I echo your comments and Congressman Castro's comments, my former colleague in the Texas House. And I stand with County Attorney Menifee and the Elections Administrator Lagoria. And the Congresswoman is right. My colleague and I, Representative Christina Morales, we joined with others and fled the state because we were fighting for democracy against this voter suppression bill that we're seeing today. You know, sometimes when we see laws passed that you don't foresee bad consequences, you say that these were unintended consequences, and you try to amend the bill to fix it. But this bill is doing exactly what it was designed to do. This is intended consequences. The state leadership, the Republican leadership, unfortunately, designed this bill to reject ballots so that you couldn't cure them. That, to me, is unpatriotic. That is the opposite of a statesman. That is totally contrary to the fundamental principle that voting, as Congresswoman said, is the bedrock of our democracy. It is the infrastructure of our democracy. And here we are in Texas, the most diverse state in the country, in this most diverse region, where we talked about and we told our colleagues that this is going to have an adverse impact among Black and brown communities specifically. And that is why we fled. That is why we were there impressing upon the U.S. Congress to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act and the For the People Act. And now they have the freedom to vote. And Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee was one of those leaders that helped pass it in the House. Unfortunately, it died in the Senate. But we're calling on the Justice Department, the United States Justice Department, and the Attorney General to take up this cause, because I have had constituents call me that, Congresswoman, have been in the district for over 40 years, registered voters, voting in every election, voting most recently during this pandemic and because of physical reasons by mail. Their mail ballot was rejected, her and her husband. One of your sorors, a very educated person, her ballot was rejected. This is a woman with a master's degree. Imagine a regular lay person, and you said the difficulties that they're having. And so we should all be appalled. We should be outraged that any voter, but in Fort Bend, our elections administrator told us last week that 50% of the ballots have been rejected. 50%. Those aren't my numbers, those are the statistics. And this isn't a partisan issue. This is impacting all of us, but some of us it impacts even more. And so, Congresswoman, thank you for your leadership. Congressman Castro, we all need to be outraged. We need to be using our social media platforms. We need to be making phone calls. We need to be urging everyone to be engaged and to fight to preserve our democracy. And as I say my last things, I know that there's so many people that fought for our freedoms to vote. So many people gave their life to end Jim Crow, to end laws that limited people of color from voting. But here we are in 2022 relitigating something that we shouldn't have to be visiting in this day and age. So we're going to have to continue to fight, continue to speak truth to power, and do everything we can to make sure that we overcome these voter suppression, Jim Crow 2.0 laws that are designed in this state under the auspices of the big lie voter fraud to hurt communities of color from voting in elections, to get an unfair advantage, and to win an election by any means necessary. So I'm going to continue to fight. I'm going to continue to work with my colleagues, and I'm going to appeal to my Republican colleagues to be statesmen and to do the right things. But in the meantime, for the U.S. Justice Department to intervene and get us the help that we so desperately needed. Thank you, Congresswoman.
What a powerful statement, Representative Reynolds. Let me make sure you hear these numbers again. Hundreds in North Texas, 300 in Travis County, hundreds, as Congressman Castro said, in Bexar County, San Antonio, 767 in Harris County, and just beginning. And the rejection covers all levels of seniors, students, persons in nursing homes, persons disabled, veterans, military personnel overseas, not able to come. And so that is why almost very new member, Representative Morales, who has a historic legacy and family in the community, who sees seniors and also sees loved ones at their most tragic moments. I guess she just sat and said, I can't do anything else but leave, because I see these people every day. And let me say that I got a call from, and getting a call from people representing seniors, and they are in an uproar about the ballots. I was with a pastor, and they said a senior came to the church because they had nowhere else to go to ask what to do with this ballot. Also concerned, is this a real ballot? Looks a little different. That again goes to their concern about giving up their private information. And this is what we're confronted with. I'm delighted that Representative Morales was able to be with us today.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Congresswoman. I'm always in awe of your leadership, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here and speak. And with all of my colleagues here, I brought you this cozy little blanket because February is coming, and I hope that your lights stay on and you're kept warm.
Thank you. I may have to be out registered,
Exactly. I know. So listen, I have a silly thing to start with. Ron Reynolds, pick a hand. You don't get to vote. That's exactly what's happening, isn't it? Because you have a 50-50 chance for your vote, for your application to be accepted. My name is Cristina Morales, and I am the state representative of Texas House District 145 in Houston, Harris County. Sadly, now more people will understand why we fled to Washington, D.C., right? The confusion at the ballot box is exactly what we were trying to avoid. We left to ensure that both Democrats and Republicans could exercise their right to vote. How many voters are going to remember whether they put their Social Security numbers or driver's license numbers when they applied to vote decades ago? For so many, this is going to be a game of luck. But don't worry, folks. There's more suppression to come. This was a targeted effort by Republicans to reduce access to the ballot box and cause chaos and confusion surrounding our elections process. The Texas Secretary of State recently announced that the supply chain issues have forced the state to reduce the number of voter registration card applications available to the public. I just can't believe that in the year 2022, why can't we register to vote online?
That's right.
We're not talking about voting online. We're just talking about registering to vote online. How can that be in 2022? There's a simple reason for all of this. The more people vote, the fewer Republicans win. You know, I heard one of my colleagues the other day say how we have only recently been a true democracy in the United States with the passing of the Voting Rights Act in 1965. And I can't believe that 57 years later, here we are fighting again. Folks, there is a horrible cancer in the state of Texas, and this cancer is killing our democracy. The more time that passes, the faster the cancer will kill our right to vote. We must fight. We must vote for candidates who take their oath to protect the Constitution as sacred as we do, right, Ron?
That's right.
And not those who just focus on getting reelected. We must educate our families, our friends, and our neighbors. And this is how we fight. For those applying to vote by mail, voters should now include their driver's license and the last 4 numbers of their Social Security number on their application, and include your phone number and an email address. Remember that you must request a mail-in ballot by February 18th for the primary. And this is for people who are already registered to vote. And I do want to say a few words in Spanish. Para los que hablan español, así luchamos. Para aquellos que soliciten votar por correo, los votantes ahora deben de incluir su licencia y los últimos 4 números de su seguro social. También incluye un número de teléfono y dirección de correo electrónico. Recuerde que debe de solicitar una boleta por correo antes del 18 de febrero para votos en la primaria. Thank you. Gracias.
Gracias, muchas gracias.
Oh, this way. Thank you.
Muchas gracias. The fight is on, and the fact that it's a crisis has been reiterated over and over again. And the sad thing about it is, whoever the oppression was intended for, I can assure you that 767 ballots probably include people of all party descriptions, all languages, all neighborhoods. Isn't that sad? And probably a large proportion is of our vulnerable communities. But you can't be 100%. And so what you thought would deny others is denying everyone the right to vote. That is a sinister mark on democracy in this country. I'm very delighted that our commissioner is in Commissioner's Court. Our commissioners are in Commissioner's Court, but they are very attentive to this issue. They are part of the new structure of the elections officer, and so I'm very glad that Commissioner Ellis, who's been working on these issues for a very long period of time, was able to have his representative here, and that is Erica Lee Carter.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Commissioner Ellis wants everyone here to know he is in this fight with you and Congressman Castro, and he is so grateful for the efforts you're seeking from the U.S. Department of Justice to seek relief to protect voting access for our voters in Harris County. He has worked and supported E.A. Longoria and her efforts in her office and will continue to do so. Today, Judge Hidalgo declared it Voter Registration Day in Harris County. And it seems like Texas is on a race to the bottom. We're one of only 8 states that doesn't allow online voter registration, like Representative Morales said. And why is that? Even before SB 1, we ranked 50th in our voting laws on the ease of voting. Now what are we? If Texas truly believed in democracy and believed in winning on policy and winning on what you're doing for the people, they wouldn't need these voter suppression laws. So we are grateful that Congressman Castro and Congresswoman Jackson Lee have stepped up. Commissioner Ellis will always be in this fight with you. He will be a resource and whatever you need to make sure our voters, our residents, our people, their voice, their vote is not denied. Commissioner Ellis is with you, and we thank you.
Let me open this up for questions, but I want to give this number for Harris County elections. If you are without information, if you don't understand the voter ID, if you feel that you are needing extra help, please call 713-755-6965, 713-755-6965. And I want Ms. Longoria to know that I am going to make a request that in the light of this emergency, that between our phone providers, that we might be able to get a 3-digit number that might be tied to the 713-755-6965, and it will be a voter number, and that would be the number that people would call. So I'm going to make that official request. We're going to open this up for questions, but I want to thank, before I make closing remarks, I'm going to open up so that there may be additional questions. Representative Morales, Representative Reynolds, Commissioner Ellis, Administrator Longoria, County Attorney Menifee, thank you, and of course, Congressman Castro. But before we close, are there any questions?
Congresswoman, the efforts on the part of certain segments of the political, say, opposition to where you're standing here have made a concerted effort to paint mail-in ballots as inherently suspect and must. So it's a process that is supposedly cannot be trustworthy. So how do you approach that narrative in trying to
Hear that question about the distorting of the corruptness of mail ballots by the opposition? How do we overcome that? You want to take that question first and I'll follow. Okay.
Sure. Well, people have been voting by mail in Texas for decades, for years and years. And Greg Abbott and the Republican legislature only now started attacking the mail voting process after they started losing elections in places like Harris County and Dallas and other parts of the state. And they've also not proven at all any kind of widespread voter fraud or hardly even a small amount of voter fraud. Of course, we see one or two cases here or there in the state, but they've not proven that there's any kind of widespread voter fraud in our mail balloting system such that they would make it so much harder for people to even get a mail ballot. Remember, this is the application just to get a ballot, and then somebody's got to send in that ballot. And so, it really is a ruse for them to make it tougher for people to vote by mail.
The way I would contravene the narrative that there's something wrong with the mail ballot is to say your grandmothers are using the mail ballot. Your disabled neighbor is using the mail ballot. And the man or woman who has unselfishly put on the uniform, and might I say in these moments of tenseness, some even headed to Ukraine, they vote by mail. And interestingly enough, the election officers across the state are seeing Republican campaigns send in mail ballots. Republican campaigns sending in mail ballots along with Democratic campaigns. And so it's backfired. Your attempt to label a democratic process of voting has backfired because Omicron, COVID has not dissipated.